the plane. Yeah. No, the news is fake. They're trying to choose my fate. I know the views is fake. They're pushing the global stage. Fake news on the radio waves.
All right, we are live here, June 30th, 2025. This is the Ips Evening Deprogram, which is now being augmented by a pre-recorded podcast, which members will be receiving notifications for as they're published. And I'm not live during these. However, I will be very responsive to all of your comments. So if you comment on any of the things that I bring up in any of these pre-recorded podcasts, I'll be addressing those directly. So we can, the purpose of this is continuity. I can't always make it to the studio, but I always have a lot to say because there's always a lot happening. And to stay in sync with it, to remain informed, I think it's important to keep some kind of communication going here. And also, I'm working on compiling a lot of my notes into a couple of manuscripts, including an updated version of AutoHoax 101. But specifically Live World, I think, is an important piece. And I'm going through a lot of my handwritten notes, and I'm transcribing them. And I thought, I'm sitting here every morning just doing voice transcriptions, reading my chicken scratch into text, and then putting it to docs. And I thought, well, I might as well use this time in the mornings to do live streams, rather pre-recorded podcasts. And so expect a deluge of more content, because what we are doing here is we are building the foundation for something permanent and unbreakable and very disruptive. That's one of the main things about it. It's highly disruptive. And we've dealt with resistance, the death clingers, the non-paid crisis actor propaganda mules walking around with fake blood on their hands like some kind of virtue signal. And it's like, no, that just means you're a victim of a mind war. In fact, I was talking about the Psy war yesterday, the psychological warfare, and how this thing in Idaho is likely a hoax based on certain things that happen to coincide with it. So first of all, let's just look at a couple of things regarding this Idaho shooting. It happened in the ground zero for the Aryan nations, this place up in Idaho called Coeur d'Alene. And not only is it geographically in the same place, so we had already made that connection. Like, this has some kind of subtext here. I don't know if it's a white nationalist shooter. At that point, we didn't really know. Obviously, most of the right, like Laura Loomer and others, were really hyping it up that it was a Muslim terrorist. But the left was suggesting it was a MAGA person. So there's been this back and forth. Others said it's just going to be a mental case, like a lone nut, which is also a possibility. But the location, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, ground zero for the Aryan nations, there's no way this is insignificant. Well, it turns out that yesterday, because this happened in the context of a fire, he starts a big fire and he shoots the firefighters. Well, this happens to be on the anniversary of the, quote, Aryan Inferno, where the firefighters there burned down the Aryan nation's security house, which they did as a training exercise. Now, what's notable about this is that was in 2001. So, June 29th, 2001, the fire department there in Coeur d'Alene burned the Aryan Nation headquarters as part of a training exercise, and this was just several weeks after 6/11/01, which is when Timothy McVeigh was executed. So there's some significant developments there. Someone also noted the Ruby Ridge kind of connection here, which we've been talking about Ruby Ridge since Rebel Ridge came out on Netflix, which the opening scene was mirrored in real life when Tyreek Hill was pulled out of his car by the police and treated roughly. Ruby Ridge, by the way, was 33 years ago. It's back in 1992. So again, Ruby Ridge, a confrontation between federal agents and Randy Weaver's family, far-right survivalists 33 years ago. So that kind of stood out. I did a poll, and let's go ahead and check the results. Who are the snipers? I asked, would it be militant Islamists, white nationalists, or a random mental patient? Let's check the results. And another indicator that this might be a hoax is how hyped up it was. Before we know the story, it's already being promulgated through all these propaganda vectors. You got Dan Bongino from the FBI. He says FBI assets are headed to the scene to provide tactical and operational support. It's an active scene. Whenever I hear active scene or tragedy, like these are theater terms. The Idaho sheriff announced that anyone in the area should take a shot to take the shooter out, which is ludicrous. But it kind of reminds me of how in other events like this, for example, the Boston bombing, you had situations where the law enforcement will basically say, send your pictures to the FBI. Like they get community involvement. So it looks like they were going for that there. But let's check the results here on the poll. Now we know the shooter is a 20-year-old. His name is Wess, like Wesley, Riley. And I thought, Wess, like Wesley, and he's a sniper, which I'll go into that in a moment. But okay, here's the results. Here's 1 hour left. 30% said it was a random mental patient. 25% said militant Islamists. And 45% said white nationalists. Now, I suggested that this would be someone who was, MAGA adjacent. After Loomer here preemptively convicted the person of being part of the Islamic State. And I don't know if I've been vindicated, but as this rolls out, as you'll see, his parents or his step-parents are pictured in front of the White House wearing MAGA hats, and it gets even weirder. It does get stranger than that. So we'll start here. Coeur d'Alene, the Inferno. Okay, here's his father, an Army cavalry scout, biker gang member. Now, if you look, he's got what appears to be 1488 on his knuckles. And that's a Nazi code. 14 refers to the 14 words about saving the white race, and 88 refers to HH, or Hail Hitler. So it's right there, which is kind of again, I think this is ludicrous. If you actually had that, I don't know. I don't know if you would photograph that with your child in your arms. And then here's his cover photo. This is I believe it's like some kind of Norse thing, Hammer of Thor, which is associated with Aryan nations. You see, like the really pure, far right white nationalists get away from Christianity at some point, and they embrace paganism because they feel like Christianity gets them to worship the religion of the group they're trying to separate from. So they kind of go into this pagan Norse mythology. And again, this is all out there in public so fast that it just seems to me like it's a story being rolled out. Breaking: an old version of the Idaho shooter Wess Riley's stepdad's LinkedIn lists an anti-terrorism certification with the State Department. Look at this. The U.S. State Department's Diplomatic Security Services and Arab-Israeli Relations Studies. So in other words, his stepdad is an Army Scout biker gang neo-Nazi who's done some kind of anti-terrorism training. Again, these are all red flags as far as I'm concerned. As far as this being real or fake. And then, this is just random. But I was thinking about his name. Because, for example, Kyle Rittenhouse, I think is a callback to Chris Kyle. Another sniper who went across state lines and shot at looters. And Kyle Rittenhouse mirrored that story. Like basically a folk hero. A made-up character given to the right to give them a hero fighting against the mob. But I was thinking about his name, Wesley. And I got to thinking, oh, Wesley, and he's a sniper. So just on the random, I just looked up Wesley Snipes to see if he's in the news. And oddly enough, I came across this article about Future Sport. I've never seen Future Sport. It has really terrible ratings on a couple of sites. But it's a 1998 American made-for-TV sci-fi film. The movie is set in 2025. And it revolves around a sport called Future Sport that combines other sports but with rollerblades and hoverboards. A non-lethal way to reduce gang warfare and channel rivalries into organized competition. So Future Sport, set in 2025, explores themes of nationalism, conflict, and the roles of sports in society. But I just thought this was kind of funny because Wesley Snipes is in it, and I'm looking at this, and it's like, does this not sound exactly like a description of Michael Aquinos's Mind War? How do we take this natural tendency towards violence and channel it into some non-lethal activities? And that's what we're talking about all the time. It just seems to me that the simulations are meant not only to give total power to the worldview monopolists at the top of this pyramid, but it might even be some kind of, and I hate to say benevolent dictatorship because it sounds like a contradiction, but it does seem that we have been tamed through theater in many significant ways. I mean, really consider the significance of how many of these scenarios are completely fictional that we have come to collectively accept as likely. Yeah, so that was the 24th anniversary of the Aryan Nation headquarters being burned. Now, again, this shooter has not been connected to, not that I know of. Let's go through some more here. A couple other comments as well. Peter Thiel has been in the news lately because of some interview he did. And someone said, oh, I think he was 33 at the time, but he was a 9/11 survivor. So he almost got 9/11, like so many other famous people. Mark Wahlberg almost got 9/11. Was there Michael Jackson? Who else? There's a list of people who were supposed to go and ended up. No, it was Seth MacFarlane. Anyway, let's go through my Twitter feed. Oh, by the way, Chinese astronauts have brought back a capsule, and some astronauts have come back from space, some taikonauts. If you haven't seen the Chinese space station, it's almost like they ordered an ISS on Temu. All right, we are joined here by Portal Complex Studios, Mom with Sons, Till, Ears Up, Buzz Dean, Copaesthetic, Let's Go, King Ravana. Says social media wiped fireman wannabe, no manifesto found. Blessed Idahoan potatoes. Yeah, I thought they would have had the manifesto out by now. What's the holdup? I mean, the FBI has access to ChatGPT. How long does it take to fabricate another redundant, obviously hoaxed manifesto? Let's Go says, bought the book and another Pengu shirt. Oh, that was you. When somebody buys shirts from Amazon, from the Infinite Plane Society side of the print-on-demand selection of products they have there, and I'll post a link if you want. It's pretty quick, by the way, especially if you have Prime. But I get emails, so I keep up with sales. And a lot of my shirts that sell are not related to anything here. But I've been making these penguin designs with ChatGPT to look like woodcuts, and those have been doing pretty well. I'm doing my best to build up a repeated, like a residual income, just something on the side to free up more of my time. And right now, I think that the Psyop trading cards are it. I think the Psyop trading cards are going to finance the IPS think tank and finance its expansion as we scale it up. Echo Locution. Oh, Locution. Mom with Sons got her shirt. Awesome. Thank you for the support. I Am Thal says IPS is a good egg. The Frugal Snowbird 4098 says, why is there a pound sign behind my name? I don't see it. But if you're on a different platform, it might be because I'm using a bot to pull all the comments into one room so I can see what everyone is saying. Apocalypse Theme Park is here. Diana South says, was the picture on your Substack article from the Idaho scene? It was from one of the articles that I'll have to go check it. So I do have a press release Substack. It's just Insider. And what I do is I use Perplexity to get all the best information on one of the topics we're going to get into that day. And what it gives me a list of sources and then photos all related to it. So let's see here. All these photos, like here, the parents of the shooter, Wess Riley. So here they are posing in front of the White House. Black MAGA hat and a red MAGA hat. So you know they're serious. But I've also heard, and I don't know if this is true, that these parents are not the ones he was with, that he's hanging out with these step parents, and that these ones have a protective order because he tried to stab them or something. But the shooter, now it's Wess Roley, 20 years old, mostly resided in Phoenix, Arizona. Says here, they have not confirmed the details, but social media speculation suggests his parents were MAGA, and viral photos show them wearing MAGA hats. So we got the MAGA, we got the biker gang Nazi guy with anti-terrorism training. According to his grandfather, Wess had wanted to become a firefighter. Okay. Or the story doesn't even make sense. Like, I don't understand why firefighters would even be a target. Where's the logic here? Psyop says, Loomer has been fuming about the New York City mayor pretending to eat with his fingers. Yeah, Laura Loomer also ate dog food with her fingers during a live stream. But Loomer was jumping the gun on this one. She said, I hope this is... She didn't say I hope, but I said to her, I actually tweeted at her, I'm like, you're disappointed that it wasn't Wesley Muhammad. Because when a lot of people watch these things, they're like, I hope it's... Like, for example, Boston bombing. When that happened, Michael Moore sent out a tweet, and he's like, it's going to be a white nationalist. Just wait for the news. 3, 2, 1. Like, he was counting down for when it would be announced that it was a Tea Party person protesting tax day. Nobody cares about the deaths. They care about the clicks, the engagement, the narrative. Like, nobody was happier on 10/8 to find out about 40 beheaded babies than Ben Shapiro, because he was able to stand on top of that pile of decapitated corpses and grandstand and lambast everybody else at the Daily Wire for not having his exact political opinions. But they use these events to drive their narratives. Dinah Southard says, wore my paper Michelian t-shirt, got lots of questions. Yeah, I put the paper Michelian I want to believe on a t-shirt. I think you might have been the one suggesting that. But that's a reference to the alien that was shown at the Mexican Congress that was obviously made out of paper mache. And yeah, as far as the photos and the pictures that were shown here, everything to me, because there's a lot of, it's pretty extensive. It looks like a major drill. Like, why do you need hundreds of people there and the FBI and all these organizations showing up for one shooter? Like, they kind of made it sound like it was a big deal, and it turns out it's just some, Adam Lanza. So, NBC special report, officials actively taking sniper fire. Now, if you subscribe to my other Substack with the breakdowns, it gives you a summary. It's all AI aggregated, but it's useful information. So it says here, Wess Roley was a young man with ties to Idaho and Arizona, hoped to be a firefighter, but instead committed premeditated sniper ambushes against firefighters after they responded to a wildfire that he started. His exact motivations are unclear at this time, with claims that his family's political leanings and speculative links to local extremist history, but no motive has been established by authorities. And I'm content to wait a few days to get all the facts. I don't instantly judge these things to be true or false. I'm just like, this is what people are saying. This is what has been reported. These are the alleged facts. So going back to my original notes. So Idaho does have that reputation. That's why I thought it was strange that it took place here at this particular spot, and it wasn't overtly some kind of white nationalist thing, but we find out it's on the anniversary of when they burnt that building. So that can't be a nothing. I mean, what do you make of it? What do you make of this being the anniversary of the Aryan Inferno? Diana Southard says, in this photograph, oh yeah, the staged photo of the men, they're not sweating, they're too calm. What if there are more sniper arsonists? Lesko says, how do they know he started the fires? Yeah, it just seems like a drill to me. It seems very drilly. And they're all just posing, just hanging out. And how do they know there's not more shooters? That would be my thing. So there's sniping going on. They take out the sniper or he dies. How do they know there's not 5 more? I always say the same thing when there's a mall shooting and the media is there reporting on it, talking to victims, coming out with their smiles because they're getting big fat crisis actor checks. And I'm thinking, how do they know there's not a second shooter? And maybe the second shooter hates the media. and knows that when the first one's done, there's a bunch of sitting ducks. They don't think this way. They just assume the scene is clear, and that's because they have the script. If I could see their shoes, Diana Southard says, their soles are most likely brand new props. Right. I happen to think this is just a drill in pulling firefighters, and something to consider too, because I know that we're supposed to revere, and I'm not trying to detract from people who do real heroic work, police, firefighters, military, etc. But the fact of it is, all of these psychological operations do make use of your fire departments, your police departments, as well as the integration with the DHS and the media. It is super integrated, and there are sellouts in all of these institutions. So on some levels, you have to look at the police departments and the fire departments as part of the, what I call security clearance society. I don't say secret society. It's kind of archaic, Masons, Illuminati, but the structure's there. But I think it makes more sense to think of it in terms of security clearances. And what we have are the institutions that would be involved if it were a hoax. I mean, 9/11 was a hoax. And, people are always crying about the firefighters. Well, the firefighters are the perps. All these firefighters were taking part in this drill that was sold to the public as a real terror event to advance major agendas on every level. Like, you think that the 9/11 hoax was pulled off by a few people at the DHS and maybe Stanley Kubrick's guidance and some special effects people? No, it required the support of many departments and many different people you would think were above that kind of, if you consider it betrayal. No, you've been betrayed by all of society's institutions. They're all liars. Penguin Doctor says NDA signed, sealed, and delivered. And one more thing about NDAs is that, if someone signs it, like we're talking about security clearances and these disclosures, these things are invalidated by criminality. So just because you have a security clearance or you sign an NDA doesn't mean that if somebody does something criminal in front of you, you're not obliged to report it. You're obligated to report, and they are the ones violating the agreement. So when someone says, oh, they're killing people at these events, no, they're not. You can just stop. They never do. If they did, the whole thing would unravel. So you're right about the NDA thing. Lord Laney says they leave all these inconsistencies in the open so as to induce cognitive dissonance. Oh, yeah. I mean, I have some tweets earmarked here. The left was calling the shooter trans, and the right was calling him trans, and the left was calling him a MAGA. And then, well, it depends. But there's some overlap. Like, some thought it was a Muslim shooter, some thought it was white nationalists. But people speculate so that they can attack the other side. This is all Psywar, and everybody's participating. It's just like a big messy food fight, and nobody's really getting hurt. We're just taking out aggression or something, scoring points. But what's sick about it, what's actually psychopathic about it, is that the people who are scoring political points by betting on who the shooter was and attacking whoever based on it, they think these things are real. They are making these statements over the dead bodies of the victims. I'm making these statements in full awareness that these victims are fake. Dwayne Aubith says, doesn't Owen Benjamin live near Coeur d'Alene? Wouldn't that have been... Yeah, I think he might have tweeted about it. And what he tweeted seemed to be some exaggerated claims about multiple shooters. But I noticed when he went up there, the Idaho thing, that's when I learned about the Aryan nations. And I thought that can't be a coincidence that you have this alt-right figure moving to this area where a lot of his political views have a history of being widely accepted there. In fact, the Daily Beast was doing a number of hit pieces on his Bertaria compound, comparing it to Ruby Ridge, suggesting he was going to do a Ruby Ridge, which is ridiculous. He's a comedian, not a survivalist. There's no guns on his thing. I don't think he's ever fired a gun. I mean, I don't know, but not that it means anything, but if I was going to be like an independent, off-the-grid survivalist, you would see videos of me shooting guns, because that's just how they brand themselves. But he's mostly just farming and occasionally telling jokes on stage. I watched part of a comedy special he did with Sam Tripoli called Bohemian Grove. I think Sam Tripoli's actually funny. I don't care for his. I don't listen to his conspiracy. I mean, I think it's entertaining, but I find his views to be very orthodox trutherville content, which is fine. A lot of people just don't know, but we're not looking to them for answers. You know, I'm not looking to any of these figures for anything other than we're studying the landscape here. The theater of Psywar. Dinah Southhart says they have to run drills so they practice catastrophic events. Dr. Back Assword said, could this be part of the gun grab agenda? Absolutely. See, one of the things about the gun grab agenda, and this also really does apply to how they talk about free speech needing to be regulated, is that the First and Second Amendment are fine, or would be fine, if it weren't for the mentally ill. And the mentally ill are it's just like this convenient excuse or justification for censorship. Like, oh, it's okay for us to be talking about these things, but there are some people with weak mental immune systems. And it's like the super spreader argument. Like, you might be healthy, but you're actually the biggest threat now because of the unhealthy people could catch what you're asymptomatically carrying. And the gun thing. Yeah, guns might be good for you, but there's some unhealthy people. So it seems to me that they have consistently branded it that way. And one of the points that I saw in all of the commentary here with the shooter, in order to detract from the MAGA element, what I hear a lot of the MAGA side saying, the right wing saying is, oh, he's on SSRIs. He's obviously got mental illness. And that actually is part of his story. So this is a common bifurcation. Whenever there's a shooter, left wing will blame the right, and the right will blame, they'll blame Second Amendment and the right's defense of it. And the right wing will always blame SSRIs, like antidepressants. Like, why does that even happen? And this has been going on since Adam Lanza. Even Littleton. The common refrain, the standard response to any mass shooting by somebody on the right is to blame it on antidepressants. It's just one of these statements they parrot. It's at this point, there's no basis in any studies for it, but the reason why is because it feeds into the idea of a false flag. So these are mind-controlled patsies, like Manchurian candidates. That's where it comes from. And the idea of patsies and mind-controlled shooters is part of how they hide the fakery. So the left wing believes the real version, and the right will say, yeah, people died, but the shooter was just mind-controlled. Let's Go says Owen has videos of him shooting guns. Okay, so I haven't seen it, but I'm glad to hear that. It's consistent. I mean, I kind of thought that's how they were trying to brand him. And I thought, going out there is only going to feed into the Daily Beast's caricature. But part of me thinks that could be intentional. Let's say hypothetically he's controlled op. What would his role be as a propaganda vector? Well, you spew all these woke right talking points to a target demographic, including the trad wife stuff, the rural off-the-grid stuff. Throw in some, anti-big government rhetoric, throw some guns in there. Like, this is how they manufacture scary scenarios for the public. But the idea that he would be somehow connected to Ruby Ridge, again, is ridiculous. They're not militant. The Bears are, like I said, mostly, I think, into farming or something, or milking cows. Skydog says, spot on, humans are living in a realm-wide zoo, but think we are in our natural habitat, same as the lions in the animal kingdom. All right, let's move on. King Ravana says, there's no interview with the Butler, Pennsylvania shooter's parents. Where's the SSRIs in that drill? Yeah, I was looking at that shooter, and there's a lot missing in that picture, isn't there? Where's his friends? The only thing we have to prove that shooter existed was the BlackRock commercial he was in. And then Ryan Routh, the golf course shooter, he was the one who was on a BBC documentary. I mean, how does that happen? And if you didn't follow that story last year, the Trump shooting, the shooters, after Trump was almost shot at on the golf course. Time magazine's cover had a more ominous undertone because the cover was Trump's in trouble and he's in a golf course falling in the sand trap. And it came out on 9/11. I'm like, Trump in trouble on a golf course, and it gets published concurrent with the assassination attempt. But as far as the shooter in Butler, Pennsylvania, yeah, that was not a patsy. And if you listen to like InfoWars, which is, again, Trutherville, they will tell you that the shooter was mind controlled or you're some kind of compromised individual and that he was killed. They will tell you this. Their whole story is based upon second shooters and snipers that are working for the Black Ops, or that it was allowed to happen. But they have a lot of convoluted stories to make sense of it, because the story doesn't make sense if you look at it at face value, especially when you consider the suggestions that the entire thing was faked. Like, if Trump's ear wound was fake, then what should follow reasonably is a reassessment as to whether the other people were actually killed. But people fall short of that. There are people who will say the Donald Trump ear wound was fake, but the sniper was actually killed. Sorry, that doesn't hold up. Or the fireman actually died. That doesn't hold up either. I was surprised that the media didn't suggest the shooter was a flat earther, because they're always trying to badmouth any group of dissidents out there. And they could just say, yeah, he didn't believe in the Coriolis effect. He did not account for the rotation of the Earth. And even though he aimed perfectly for the 47 on the side of the president's head, he missed because the Earth rotated and the bullet was diverted. King Ravana says, where is BlackRock? They're just buying Bitcoin. I'm pretty sure their headquarters is at the North Pole, on top of that 33-mile circumference black magnetic rock mountain, Mount Meru. If you believe it's there. If you trust Gerardus Mercator and John D. And why wouldn't you? Nothing Major says, the Bob Dylan Glastonbury script is hilarious. Why Bob Dylan? Yeah, he's the Bob Dylan guy. Kind of a knock on Bob Dylan. I think Bob Dylan defended Israel, and this guy was chanting death to the IDF, and he had his whole tour canceled over it. I'm not offended. I'm not into canceling. I'm all for free speech, but they have to draw a line when it comes to incitement and what they call stochastic terrorism, stochastic violence. All right, let's see here. Diana Southard says, sand trap, like the Middle East sand trap. That's good. You know, I was looking at that story. Okay, so you got Ryan Routh on the golf course, and then, of course, in the Time magazine cover, Trump falls into the sand trap. And I was thinking, Ryan, Iran, kind of an anagram. And Iran had released a video simulation of a drone striking Trump on a golf course. So we had that building up. And now you're adding in here the sand trap. Very, very good connections. All right, let's continue here. Andrea says in the comments, had remarked that I couldn't help but notice that Fall Out Boy uses the same crown logo as No Kings. So I looked to see if they have any songs with King in the title, and they have a song called We're Doomed from the Start, the King is Dead. Pop quiz time. A number of police officers were recognized for their response to the Trump assassination attempt. A number of officers, we'll say more than a couple dozen. In other words, these officers were commended for their bravery when 7/13 went down. How many officers were recognized and commended for their response to the Trump assassination attempt? Put your answers in the chat below. Again, the question is, how many police officers were commended for their bravery during the Trump shooting psyop? Diana Southard says 33. Now, you shouldn't know that. You're not psychic. And everything that happens on TV is real and random. These aren't engineered events. So there's no way you should be able to predict this, right? because news is real and there shouldn't be patterns that mean anything. Yeah, 33 state police officers recognized for a response to Trump assassination attempt. 33. Why is that? Again, I think you all know the answer. It's the hoax code. It's so the insiders know not to take it too seriously. So they know it's a plot change, a plot twist. I mean, that's what we are. Are we not insiders at this point? Are we not reading their code accurately? I think we have the clearest view. And I don't say that we have certainty. And the people who claim to have certainty are usually low information believers or low information disbelievers. But no, I say we have clarity, which is very important. Clarity is more important than certainty. We're not talking about a belief system. We're talking about an updated operating system, a better model for how we approach media. And I'm working on a video using a lot of AI. I'm trying to make it entertaining that will break down the concept of the metascript, news consumption, worldviews, and comparing the different operating systems. You know, active versus passive news consumption, informed disbelief versus belief. But I'm trying to put it into a concise format, something that is concise and clear enough that we can confront people with it. Because I think there's a lot of people who are still stuck with a 2002 post 9/11 operating system, or stuck in 2013 right after Sandy Hook, or still stuck in 2020. And what we have here is an update that everybody should take, but I think they need to see it in a clear, concise, kind of short format in order to be able to confront it and choose whether or not to reject it. Like right now, you can walk around calling things a false flag and be forgiven. You can still think that Netflix programming coinciding with the news is evidence that you're living in a video game. You can still believe you're a video game character if you want. But these wrong explanations and answers are going to look increasingly ludicrous as time goes on, especially if I present something a bit more compelling. And that's the objective. Lord Laney says, damn it, I was doing something, but I yelled it before anybody, I'm sure. As soon as he says how many. Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to have a card. I'm having 12 new cards printed up for the Psyop trading cards. And I'm doing one with the number 33. And it's going to be designated hoax code. And I'm thinking I'll give that one away to the winners of the pop quizzes that we have here. And just a hint, you know, the answer to every pop quiz is pretty much 33. Okay, here's a little more background information. Peter Thiel was in New York on September 10th with Morgan Stanley, and he missed Flight 93 by a few hours. Imagine that. I didn't put him on my Wikipedia. I have a Wikipedia of 9/11 survivors, but I'll have to add him to it. They eventually made it home to San Francisco the next morning. Hours later, Thiel learned that a San Francisco-bound United aircraft from Newark Airport Flight UA-93, his plane, was hijacked and crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. So that was the Shanksville, where the hijackers had shanks. The Let's Roll Psyop. Now, I'm not sure if I'm reading too much into this. Others have kind of agreed there might be something more. Beyonce was singing a country music song in a red car that was levitating across the audience, over the audience's heads by a crane. It kind of reminded me of Rocket Man, of Starman, of Elon Musk's car in space. But she's in a car dressed up as a cowboy, and she has an American flag. And as the car is going over the audience as she's singing, it gradually begins to tip, like the Titanic or something. And I think she's got a seatbelt, so I don't think she was in danger, but it looked like it was about to dump her. And she had to say, stop, 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 and they brought it down. So Bay Vanguard says, this is not a malfunction. Beyonce is performing a piece of poetic performance art. This symbolizes the decline of America. The tipping red car acts as a metaphor for momentum and the nation's rapid descent, speeding toward a profound reckoning with its own fate. Now, I seem to remember a couple of years ago, Beyonce was on some magazine. I think she was on a red horse. Do you all remember the ominous looking imagery where she's on this red horse? And things were getting, I think was it 2020? And I think she's won 33 Grammys, right? Okay, here it is. Cowboy Carter album. Beyonce riding demonic red horse. My reaction, Beyonce riding. Okay, so there's a number of people have pointed out the symbolism here. Vogue. So if you look at my phone here, this is Beyonce on a red horse, and she's got like a black crown. So this came to mind, and this was from July of 2022. So it's 2 years ago. So this came to mind when I saw her on this red car. I don't know what kind of car it's meant to be, but what do you all think? Evening IPS says Rocky USA. Andrea says, I found out the big beautiful bill is for 3.3 trillion. I'm surprised they didn't say 3.4. Like, they're always trying to throw us off a little bit. They murdered Joan Rivers on Beyonce's 33rd birthday. Well, do you remember she got her 33rd Grammy the same night that Taylor Swift got her Grammy, and she had just turned 33. And at that point, we were comparing Beyonce and Taylor Swift. There seemed to be some kind of story, some subtext there. And then you have the thing with Ye taking the award from Swift. I promised we wouldn't talk about Taylor Swift again after that Super Bowl thing. But she's one of these characters on the world stage that, unfortunately you can't avoid how they integrate them, and they are significant players. In her case, she brings a lot of, Taylor Swift dies a lot. Like, she died in that movie called, now I didn't watch it. I just watched the clip, but it's like 13 minutes into the film, she gets killed. I think it might have been a musical. But she's very well known for the number 13. It's connected to all of her albums, all of her significant life events. I think that was her 13th football game. But yes, Taylor Swift is in some movie where 13 minutes in, she gets pushed into the road. But the number 13 is very much tied into the goddess, the lunar goddesses. And she's been compared with various dead female icons like Amelia Earhart, Marilyn Monroe, Princess Diana. And these are deliberate overlaps. They do this with Elon Musk. I mean, Elon Musk is a Frankenstein mashup of a lot of different characters, from Tony Stark to even Henry Ford, Jack Parsons, Gene Wilder. But it's part of their archetype building. They build up these... Oh, it was Amsterdam. Thank you. Amsterdam's the one where she dies 13 minutes into it. But it's just an example here of how they can program these, they can write these seeming miraculous coincidences into somebody's life story, but it's all script. All right, let's move on. So Beyonce's car tipping. I got into this conversation with somebody named Ski1384, who's on Twitter. And we were discussing the everything is fake crowd, which we are not. The everything is fake crowd. And I'm not into naming names. I'm not trying to call out operatives or agents or people who are acting in bad faith, spreading information just for clicks and money or something like that. But what I'm actually interested in is pointing out the flaws in arguments and discussing our competing models. And there's a group of people who say everything is fake. And this is a mirror. Like, people say everything's fake, like they're trying to be jaded, making an ironic statement. But it's very imprecise, and it's actually disruptive to what we're doing. To say everything is fake is to say that there's no nuance to their take. So there's no value in it because anybody can say everything's fake. It's the same logical flaw as saying everything on TV is real. Like, you have to have some nuance, some basis for making your claims. But I remember after Parkland, there was a group called The Birds Are Fake. And so The Birds Are Fake was a group that ran around doing these big events, and the media gave them all kinds of coverage. And I'm like, wait a minute, we've been saying things are fake for a long time, and they steadfastly ignore us. Why is this particular protest group getting a huge following? Well, it turns out that The Birds Are Fake was a fake conspiracy group that came out of Parkland High School. And if you remember, after the Parkland High School massacre, 17 years of school shootings following Littleton, 17 people get killed, big tragedy. They start going to grocery stores and doing die-ins where they pretend to be dead, and they blame the shoppers for supporting the Second Amendment. So they were always theater. The event itself was theater. This has been already figured out. And don't feel bad about criticizing school shootings. Alex Jones got his civil suit verdict overturned. He's not paying anything. He doesn't have to pay Sandy Hook $58 million. So it's safe to say, David Hogg, for example, these other characters, we know what they're doing. So they were doing these die-ins after the shooting, after the event. They were, fake dying in order to get public sympathy, etc. But then a part of the group went and did this thing called Birds Are Fake, where they said birds are all fake. That's a ridiculous claim, but it gets the attention. So now the people calling shootings fake look like people calling birds fake. And these birds are fake people said, yeah, we're doing this to draw attention to the people who say shootings are fake. Which doesn't even make sense. It almost sounds self-defeating. And it's very odd for a group of people who survived a massacre to get involved in these prankish PR stunts. So these people who are saying everything is fake, as far as I'm concerned, are running with the CIA narrative designed to discredit what we're doing. I say CIA loosely. Just it's an intel. It's a Psyop entertainment complex operation. Yeah, exactly. Ollie Goering. Theater kids are crisis wildin'. And they were wild. Remember some of these kids? Oh, I'd love to go back and revisit. Parkland High School. Parkland is the name of the hospital where JFK was taken after he was fake shot, and he died 17 minutes after being taken there. But I remember some of these characters. One of them was so angry. Then she goes on Ellen DeGeneres, and they're just, talking about this event. And then she's like, here, I'm going to give you several $1 million. Here's a big check to start March for Our Lives. And as soon as they get the big check, they start crying. And it's like, wait a minute. I've never seen a crisis actor cry real tears until that moment, until they were handed a big check. All right, let's see here. Let's go on with this. Okay, so the everything is fake thing. I think it's intended to discredit media fakery analysis. Birds are fake, everything is fake, pandas are fake. No, that's all meant to discredit what we're doing. Now, it's possible some people are just wrong. It is. Like, it's possible they don't know. Like, the people who think pandas are fake, they're not all wittingly operatives. I think at worst you could call them propaganda mules. And they're doing it out of ignorance or a bad habit. So it's possible they're just wrong. But the more time that passes, the less we should see this. The more we clarify our model and expose it to people who are operating under a different set of presumptions, I think the clearer it will get as to who is being authentic and who is upholding some prefabricated narrative. Because predictive and concurrent programming within entertainment aligning with contemporaneous psychological operations is not only well documented, but it's pretty much, I think, well explained and understood. We're not confused anymore. After 9/11, I could say, looking back, yeah, I was confused. Like, I thought it was real, but I also thought it was some kind of massive satanic ritual. I thought that with many of these events. I thought, yeah, they're just sending in these drugged up, mind-controlled assassins to terrorize the populations. And I thought it was like a Democrat-run terror op to take the guns. Like, I was confused. You could look back and say, yeah, I was confused. But had I gone with the mainstream story, I wouldn't have been any less confused. Because these are both states of being misinformed. But I am no longer confusable by media. You know, once you recognize that media is a skillful liar, and you adopt the skeptic's position of suspending judgment, you do become what I call a mind war inoculated. And of course, the public has no mental immune system when it comes to these things. Like, this is a little late. Trump believes spherical UFOs are real. Silent, spherical, capable of outmaneuvering the most advanced fighter jets on Earth. So again, UFOs are spheres, they're not flat disks. But this comes out, and this is trending long after the Pentagon already admitted all the Area 51 stuff is made up propaganda. And again, whenever I come across this, I'm just amazed at how influential the Pentagon is in creating culture, science fiction. Pretty much everything within science fiction, all the sci-fi tropes, yeah, that's government propaganda, and people are entertained by it. And that's why I say that entertainment is simply propaganda, and the entertainment, the enjoyment is just a side effect. It's just the sugar and the poison. So here's Trump talking about spherical, not round, spherical UFOs.
There's 3 or 4 pilots. These are not people that make up stories. They said, all I know, sir, is there was a round object that was going 4 times faster than my F-22, which is a very fast plane. And it wasn't, it shouldn't have been. It was round, sir. They have seen, 4 or 5 guys I've interviewed, solid people, great pilots for the U.S. Air Force, etc. They've seen things that they cannot explain.
Now, whenever somebody's talking about seeing things, what do they mean? Like an object flew by their airplane? No. They're talking about a blip on a radar. They're talking about something that could have been planted there in order to allow them to be convenient false witnesses for something. I think a few months ago they were talking about underwater craft doing things that weren't possible with any human-made craft, and underwater UFOs were a big thing. But anyway, this UFO talk needs to stop, unless we're just going to talk about the fact that it's government propaganda. The Pentagon lied about it. They made it all up. And why? The official story is, yeah, we lied in order to disinform potential witnesses to secret craft. So in other words, if some civilians see an experimental craft, they want to F with those people's minds and discredit them. Say, we made up this stuff just to screw with you people so you're not taken seriously. Like, that's sinister. But that's what they admit. I don't think that's the real explanation. I think the real explanation is they need a replacement for angels, for the progressive New World Order Nasatology religion, and aliens fill in that blank. Dwayne Obith says there's a lot of overlap between the animals are all fake and the transvestigators. Oh, yes, they're part of the same, they use the same logical fallacies. And also, I think these are non-defensible claims, and they're unfalsifiable. They're not honest claims. The people who make these claims are generally anonymous for a reason. I was just listening to Fakeologist, and he had Mr. E on the show. So I messaged Mr. E through the chat, and I said, is it your contention, do you contend, that Donald Trump gave birth to Barron at the age of 60? Because his whole thing is that the presidents are all women. And he kind of said no. He said he does not contend. He didn't like that word. He said, it's not my claim. So he's kind of vague. It's kind of vague. And I'm like, wait, if you're going to say, because it's just about being consistent. If you're going to say this is true, that all these presidents are, in fact, which is a ridiculous claim, then you have to explain the children. Well, their explanation is these are genetically engineered mutants. These are they outsource it or they have some breeding farm. Like they have to invent stuff to make sense of it because it just does not make sense. Or they have to come up with a new model. But what we're looking at here is likely disinformation. And what I think typifies disinformation is that the people who believe in it have been tricked into believing it. They shoehorn bad arguments in with logical fallacies, and it's always calculated. One of the most important ones to recognize today is the loaded question. Just asking questions, the truthers say, no, you're not. You're trying to make an assertion without being accountable. And when you're called out on it, you have to say, I was just asking a question. No, that you can't let them get away with that. These are bad faith claims disguised as questions. What are they spraying on our heads every day? I'm sorry, but your question presumes that there's a spray and there's a they. And that includes an appeal to motive, an evil plan, and literally a spray, which is a far cry from the reaction of hot air at high altitudes within the rarefied air and the condensation. Like there's no spray that could do what a contrail does. But that's what we're doing here. What we're doing is we're just applying reasoning, clear-headed reasoning to the misinformation and separating real from fake. Esteban says, I put that clown on fool's notice. Mr. Reach is more like it. Well, okay, the thing about Mr. E is that he has been very consistently making these claims for years and years, but he's anonymous. If he wasn't anonymous, I would take him more seriously. And if he's really a whistleblower for the biggest conspiracy of all, why wouldn't he come out and take ownership of it? But what's the point? Like, why such a... Okay, I think that particular Psyop has replaced reptilians. I think the reptilians and the... I guess reptilians was it. And before that, it was always about bloodlines, the Illuminati bloodlines. But it's just, these are just interchangeable ways of reframing the idea of the cabal being like almost a different species. Let's Go says, I get your skepticism, but of course people use surrogates all the time. Yeah, that's fine. And I get that that could be the case. But if their whole claim rests upon the idea, we're talking about the promoters of elite gender inversion, they haven't established that. But for that to be true, they also have to make these additional claims. So I'm like, okay, you got your initial claim here, but now you're also saying that they're not even having their own children, or these are completely manufactured families. And so with each additional claim, you have to supply more evidence. And that's where it all falls apart. So there's just not enough research going into their claims at all. But there is something that's being pointed at in some instances but I'm not seeing the big conspiracy. Mr. E is also a big Bible guy too. And so the biblical context, again, we're talking about alt media mixed with the Bible. They're framing their worldview in a paradigm which has the Satanists on the left and the good guy Christians on the right. It's actually a woke right thing, the J pill mixed with the red pill. But anyway, it's not a serious claim, and it might even be a discrediting thing. And it's also ridiculous. I've confronted these people a few times, and what I've run into is a sort of a disingenuous nature where they're not being honest, they're not about the facts, and they're almost mocking the people that believe it. In fact, I did an investigation into one of these characters, Bevy112, and I found, I don't do this anymore, but I did write a course on counter-stalking because I was a target of stalkers. And I don't think it's hard to dox people. People, especially if you've ever had a Facebook account, like it's not hard to find anybody. Our channel, our think tank doxed somebody who was part of the Q operation. So anyway, I decided to figure out who this person was because she was accusing me of being a biological woman. And I don't have a problem with that claim. Like, fine, I don't care. Think what you will. I'm a woman. Big deal. Like, it's not an insult, but she was using it as an insult. And I'm like, wait a minute here. If you're seriously a Christian woman waking up the Christians to the evil nature of the rulers, then why would you so flippantly use it as a way to, as an ad hominem and on bad evidence? Like, it just seemed like she's not serious. So I look into this person and I find out that she is not a Christian. She is not a Christian, right-wing, Q-adjacent conspiracy theorist on X trying to wake the world up to the true nature of the elite. No, she was a liberal arts community college professor who was actually kind of rotund. And in the picture that I saw, she was wearing a rainbow shirt. And she was literally giving a talk about sensitivity to pronouns. So in other words, this is a leftist activist who is literally ladling out conspiracy theories to the right to get them to adopt ludicrous ideas that can then be used to make them look not only unhinged and crazy, but they can accuse them of being phobic. Now they're transphobic. And I'm like, wait, how does that work? We're talking about a literal like leftist gender activist pretending to be a transvestigationist. And again, I figured this out and I doxed this person. She blocked me and I kind of left it alone. And I realized, you know what? This whole thing's an op. There's nobody serious in it. And again, I mean, you can verify for yourself. You will not find one person that will put their face and name and real identity to these outlandish claims. Thank you very much, Diana Southard. Appreciate the support. And Nicotramus, thank you very much for that. Esteban says, homework. He runs a show on the same topic every day. IPS runs this community without question. I could care less about subscriber counts. Oh, here we go. The only bad thing about finding IPS is how ass the other channels are. He does more research than them, yet yo-yos doing terrible impressions come in after everyone else has done theirs. Well, this has always been built on the concept of a think tank. Long before we had AI to aggregate information, we relied on human intel, and there's only so much time in a day for one person to get information. And in today's deluge of malinformation, one person couldn't possibly give you the perspective that you need to have a complete picture. One person's perspective can't be that valuable. There's a point where we're overwhelmed. There's just too many competing versions and we need more eyes and ears and insights. And so what we have done is we've maintained this think tank model where the value of the people joining isn't the numbers. And subscriber count is really just a vanity metrics. It hardly means anything as far as reach anymore. I think there's more important things to consider. And it really comes down to the ideas. So every person brings their ideas, their insights. And what we have done, I think, is we've pulled together, and we continue to pull together a lot of the best information on these various topics. So it's primarily research driven. And I'm only trying to improve our ability to get the best information and the fastest and clearest takes on things. And that's why I'm leveraging AI. That's why I'm using the tools that are available to get more information with sources so we can arrive at the place of informed disbelievers rather than just everything's fake. And back to that one tweet, what's wrong with the everything is fake crowd is that their take is shallow. Everything is fake is shallow. Everything is real is shallow. We aim for depth, informed disbelief. We know more about the garbage they believe, and that leads us to not believe in it. You find this a lot, with, and I'm not advocating atheism because I think it's kind of flawed when most perspectives in atheism take for granted the objective reality of the world as presented by the Church of Nasatology. So there's, when we say atheism, we're talking about like people who are adopting a certain perspective towards non-belief. They're not going to accept something without evidence. And what you often find is that the atheists are not ignorantly rejecting religions, but they have enough information, so much so that they can no longer believe it. So they're informed disbelievers. You could even say the same with flat earthers versus globe earthers. You will find that flat earthers tend to know more about the solar system, heliocentrism, and the claims of NASA and the space agencies than the people who just passively believe it but don't even look into it. The passive globe believer who believes in all the space missions and believes in the moon landings, golfing on the moon, and all that stuff, yeah, they can't tell you anything in detail about any of the missions. But you ask a flat earther, and they will have a pretty thorough understanding of what they don't believe in. Copaesthetic says, well, that's an interesting point. Mr. E and FACO are all about the deaths are increasing because Mavax, Psyop. Yeah, the Vaxageddon Psyop is a Psyop. People have an emotional attachment to it. Now, here's why I'm anti-vax. Here's why. Like, I'm anti-vaxxer. I'm not pro-vax. I'm not anti-vax, but I'm anti-vaxxer and I'm anti-pro-vaxxer. And here's why. If you take that stance, now you are in lockstep with an army of idiots. I'm sorry. I mean, an army of robots, zombies. Because once you take that position, now you're with the geoengineering crowd. Now you're with the I'm scared of chemtrail crowd. Now you're with the anti-immigrant, the xenophobic crowd. Now you're with the people who are completely programmed to see every psyop as real until proven fake. They believe in false flag theories. You've just thrown in your lot with the cute people, with the people drinking the Kool-Aid at Alex Jonestown. So no, you can't take any anti-position without moving yourself into the world stage political horseshoe, where now you are in lockstep with all these programmed people. You're just a puppet at that point. You're relinquishing your free will when you take one of these positions, when you advocate for them. I'm not going to advocate on behalf of an anti-position, even if I'm against the thing, because now you're also backing up the entire infrastructure of media fakery itself. You're a traitor to your own values at this point. If you know about media fakery, you should be completely abstaining from being actively involved in politics, believing in politicians, or taking any of these positions. We should be moving past that. Ted Stryker says, and that makes you a propaganda mule. So if you're an anti-vaxxer, you're either an agent or a propaganda mule. There's really no third option here at this point. And why would you be a propaganda mule? I have more respect for paid crisis actors, and I understand why they're smiling now, than I do for people who are spreading the propaganda, the fear porn, the terrorism, maintaining the status quo, terrorize the population, antagonize them, without getting paid. But in fact, getting censored, sacrificing their channels to promote ideas that only serve the power elite. Ted Stryker has brought in 20 blue wrenches, titanium. You can check, it's pure titanium. Thank you for that. Diana Southard, it's Snoopy, D. Brooks, Flat Bob, Into the Break, Cleodessa, Symbia, Don Kane, Emma Lou, Nicholas, Haley Harmon, King TL, Chalk Body Outline, Marcel, Bart, J5, Steve B, Einsoff, and Josh Lebsock have all received the blue wrench. And it finally matters. It finally matters because I am now recording a daily, sometimes twice daily podcast called the Ips Deprogram. So this is the Ips Evening Deprogram. We take calls, live chat, but other times I'm just going to be recording in sequence Ips Deprogram 1, 2, 3, and these will just be ways to keep everyone in sync. But it's also members only. And I will be reading your comments and building on each episode by going back and reviewing comments. So if you're a member, you now have access to the newest podcast. Wake Soto says V's are bad. They're props in the mind war. They really are. And needle phobia is a programmed fear that is given to the right, just like the left is AR-15 phobic. They're afraid of guns. They're afraid of needles. And it's all psychological. I think it's worth pointing out the connection between the founder of Netflix and his relation to Edward Bernays and Sigmund Freud, because we're talking about propaganda influencing the public as a mass. Combine that with the Freudian understanding of the subconscious. Symbolism is also a big part of this, but influence operations, and influencing us by our fears, our instinctual drives. And I think there's a reason why you have these dialectics. Needles versus guns happens to be one of them. Gun is an active thing. You're talking about the symbol of it. Whereas the needle, even though it's a pokey and it is active, in its utility, it's passive. You have to be passive. You're letting Big Brother inject you. You're letting it penetrate the border. And the border being your skin, injecting you with aliens or extraterrestrials or some substance from without that is now infused in your being. So you're changed. And the connection here is on the right. They're closed borders and closed skin. They don't want the aliens coming in and tainting their pure nationalistic DNA and making it something other than what America was. So there's a connection between nationalism, closed borders, the anti-vax attitude, and I believe it's all psychological. It has to do with your attitude towards big government and state power. Because you'll notice the left is all about big government. They're like, vax me, Big Brother. Open the borders. Let the aliens in. They're welcoming the aliens from above, from space. Because, like we believe. Whereas the right is anti-illegal alien. They're anti-extraterrestrials. I mean, one of those aliens attacked Tucker Carlson. They say aliens are demons. And then they're anti-pokey. Well, these aren't principled rejections because of valid fears. These are programmed responses that tell a lot about your relationship to power. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but I'm saying that the pattern here is pretty clear to me. There's a reason why, and I saw this happening real time, that Tucker Carlson was saying in the same breath, hey, these aliens are from far away, and these aliens are, a threat to you and your family. So you're like, oh, these aliens, he's like, they're from like Africa. And he's like, they're far away, they're from Africa. It's like, okay, so we have these African immigrants coming. And in the next segment, he's like, aliens are demons. My friend at the Pentagon told me it's really dark. So now we're being told about dark aliens, very scary. After a segment where he's talking about aliens from Africa. Side by side, marketing xenophobia on a whole new level, because now it's being scared of aliens along with being scared of people from other countries. Now, these are 100%, I would say, engineered narratives. If you think about Psywar, what you're really doing here is you're looking at how do we frighten this target demographic best. That's what Psywar has always been. Psychological warfare has always been, you play upon the fears of the locals. You play upon their beliefs, their superstitions, and you engineer your theatrics to correspond with it. That's why we look at the concurrent and predictive programming. We're looking at what are people being programmed to fear. Thank you, Reality Witness. Appreciate your comment and the support here. And my objective here is to take a complex subject and make it as understandable as possible so that people can confront it for what it is. I can't expect somebody to listen to several long-form podcasts and arrive at some conclusion. But if I can present what I think is an easily described model, then they can say, I reject it. I'm going to stick with the mainstream. I'm going to just trust that the news isn't bending my reality. Fine. But now there's an alternative. Conscious Reality says, I still have family members I haven't spoken to since 2020 because I refuse to comply. Dr. Back Assword says, just because you're not an anti-vaxxer doesn't mean you're on the jab treadmill. Yeah, you can be a non-vaxxer. You can be a conscientious objector to the Psywar. where you're not even taking positions. And one of the refrains from the anti side is that, oh, it was forced. And they'll scream the word forced. They were forcing us. And the way they say it, it's all hype. And they misuse the word force. And the word force has a lot of emotion attached to it. It's a propaganda technique to use emotional appeals to fear to influence people, where they are, in my view, the antis are the terrorists. Dr. Fauci's not running around scaring me. No, it's the anti-Dr. Fauci people who are telling you, oh, did you know that the people who get it are going to shed protein spikes that will get into you, and now you're going to have black goo nanobots infecting your bloodstream. I had one anti-vaxxer tell me that his pregnant girlfriend got the thing because she caught the shedding from somebody else. I mean, they make up their own stuff, but like I'm telling you, it's propaganda. They're propaganda mules. But the fact that it works, I mean, this tells you, if you have family members that are disavowing contact with you because of your opinion on this, it just shows you that religion divides people. And mainstream media is a religion. Mainstream and alternative media have supplanted traditional religions in every way. And the divisions are along the same lines. I would actually compare the injectable to the Eucharist. If you look at media as the world state church, the people who believe it are saved. The people who don't are unsaved. They're conspiracy theorists, heretics, misinformationists. They don't believe the doctrines. They're out there rural, they're pagan, and they're anti-big cities. You'll notice these attitudes, rural versus urban. It fits with this. So like the quarantine thing, the right wants to, ideally the right wing wants to quarantine against corrupt society, corrupt Western liberal values. That's why the Beartaria exists, to get away from the cities. That's why all the right wingers say, get out, get out, get out of the cities. Be afraid of subways. They push a lot of fear. A lot of this, you have to quarantine against the other side. But what you have here is that acceptance of the mainstream priesthood, which are the scientists and the media pundits, means that you agree that the people who aren't in the church of media, as in alternative media, the conspiracy theorists, alt media, they're unsaved. So they've created a division between saved and unsaved. And the saved will say, hey, those who haven't taken salvation need to be avoided. Not just because they're super spreaders of this new concept of sin, because I would suggest that the virus has replaced sin, because the left didn't believe in sin. They didn't have to modify their behaviors because of fear of sin or its consequences, but they do believe in the virus, and they adopted social distancing before anybody. They adopted lockdowns and the enforced limits on how many people could go into places. They basically became almost a puritanical cult. Like the whole COVID thing was very puritanical. But they did it overnight over the belief that the other side is now a threat to us, the unsaved. But similarly, the unsaved, they were also quarantining against the saved, because they said, oh, you'll catch the shedding from them. But they're also trying to quarantine against their ideas. So they had people split on the contents of their blood and now their ideas. So they had these, it's a major division, but I think it's pre-existing. But when I hear that stuff, it just kind of underscores the importance of what we are doing here. And one point that I often have made before is that we have to understand people's perspectives and where they're coming from. And the people who are in the MSM box cannot comprehend the off-world stage perspective. And they're programmed to respond in a predictable way to the MSM plus, to the alternative media perspectives. So when I engage people, I try to mirror their perspective, or at least maintain healthy levels of agreement, because they're not rational. They're not rational. It's not like you can have a rational discussion. No, they're going to judge you according to what their priesthood has told them. Now, it's up to you if you want to maintain friendship and contact with people who are programmable bots. And I don't look down on people. Earlier I mentioned armies of idiots, and I just meant like idiocracy, where people have outsourced their intellect in important areas and they have become functionally zombies, tools. Like when we talk about the elite, well, 2020 showed me that the elite isn't just some group on the top of Mount Meru somewhere. No, the elite is your nosy next door neighbor. It's the enforcers of the paradigm that may not even serve our own interests, but they're doing it because they're just puppets, extensions. They are the elite. Kevin Mooring says, shouldn't we be dead from chemtrails by now? Yes. Well, at least not us, but the believers in it should. I'm surprised that, like, Richie from Boston hasn't suffered from chemtrail lung yet. And I don't wish anything bad on anybody, but I hope he stops vaping, because vaping will probably do him in faster than these so-called chemtrails. This is what my only issue with someone like him, anybody who promotes chemtrails as like a gig, as a job, is that if he were to be honest with the facts and recognize that he can't predict them. But look, I made an app using a site called VO3, which I'm not a coder, but there are sites where you can create apps and the AI will do it for you. So I had an app created that predicts condensation trails. You put in your zip code and it'll show you, okay, these flights are coming over. This is the weather. You're likely to see condensation trails here. So it took me 10 minutes to produce an app that can predict condensation trails. Now, I tried to make the app predict, quote, chemtrails. And this shows you how tight the controls are. The AI would not let me mislabel them. But I was doing it to make a point. Nobody who believes in chemtrails can predict them. There's no mechanism by which you can say, oh, the secret government airplane drone things are going to do stratospheric aerosol injections on Tuesday between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. right over my house. You cannot predict that. But I can predict condensation trails. And then you'll see those and you'll call them chemtrails. So what it comes down to here is observational data and what does it support? It does not support chemtrails. And my thing is, Richie from Boston could understand this. And he could say to his 5 million followers, hey guys, I was wrong this entire time. And nobody's going to unsubscribe. They're going to say, oh, they got to you. What is it? Delta Airlines giving you free tickets? Sellout? But some people will change their minds and he won't lose them. So I have to wonder, what's keeping some people from maintaining long debunked truth or orthodoxies? Well, the best explanation is likely they're paid to be doing it and it's just a habit of mind. I'd like to think that's it. I'd hate to think they're getting paid, but there's a reason for it. The same reason why you have climate change activists. A lot of people really believe in it, but they're being led by provocateurs. They're being led by a bigger agenda. Space Chimp says, I'm more afraid of fent trails than chemtrails. Right. Well, look, the first time I heard about chemtrails, the person was smoking Camel Wides and drinking Jim Beam. I mean, I was too. But they were pointing out the chemtrails and like, look at that. They're spraying us with poisons. And I was like, I don't think you really care about that. Like, if you really cared about poisons 20,000 feet above your head that may or may not be doing something, what are you doing here down on Earth? Just inhaling and imbibing poisons. What if chemtrails got you high? Like higher than fentanyl? Like what's in the chemtrail juice? Let's see what else we got here. Going through your comments. By the way, Naomi Klein, she wrote The Shock Doctrine, Disaster Capitalism. Very smart, but she's also a big chemtrail pusher. Look, there's a certain level of, I think, there's a certain level of intelligence where, or immersion in this stuff, where a person has to have been exposed to better information, but they hold to something they know to be false, and it's very fishy and questionable. But anyway, she's consistently pushing chemtrails, but I know she flies. I've seen her Instagram. So how do you sleep at night? How do you sleep at night if you believe in chemtrails, but you also get into the occasional airplane? Like that thing up there is actually waging biological warfare on innocent people, children, puppies, plants. Innocent people everywhere are just being doused with poison every day by these things. And I'm going to get in one because it's faster to get from point A to point B than driving. How can you sleep? The pilots probably don't even know. The pilots don't even know they're part of a covert plan to destroy the world, and you know what's happening, and yet you still get on the plane knowing that you're killing people. You are now a war criminal because biological warfare, that goes against the Geneva Convention. You are a war criminal. Naomi Klein is a war criminal. David Icke, he's pushed chemtrails for decades. I know he's flown. Did any of these speakers at any of these flat earth conferences fly on airplanes? Yeah. Dearth, big pusher of chemtrails, he's been on an airplane. So these are all criminals. These are all bad people with no conscience, psychopaths. Like, look, I know that getting into this particular device is going to do damage to the environment. It's going to alter the climate, and it's going to kill people long term. It's going to empower the elite. But I really don't want to drive to Denver. Fourth Street Tricky says, who is the first person to bring up the idea of chemtrails? Art Bell. It got popularized on Art Bell's program. And Art Bell and Whitney Strieber wrote a book together called The Coming Superstorm. The first example of climate disaster fiction. Whitney Strieber is a guy who claims that he was probed by aliens. And we all know that story came out of the Pentagon, so he made it up. It's just this, I don't know what you call it, interspecies erotica, him and the aliens, and then it's all about alien hybrids. But his whole story is based on lies that the Pentagon admits that they promulgated about Area 51. So that guy and Art Bell did this big book on climate change, etc. But it was on Art Bell's program that chemtrails were popularized. Daniel Moore says they aren't commercial flights. Sorry, you don't get to say that, because 99.999% of the chemtrail boofers take pictures of condensation trails all the time. And they share these things. And so the entire belief, the entire basis for chemtrail belief is the condensation trails from commercial flights. So you don't get to suddenly change your narrative and say, oh no, we're not talking about those. Yes, you are. I've had a number of very dishonest chemtrail boofers come up to me and say, no, we're not talking about commercial flights. Well, then tell all of your buddies. Tell all of the big chemtrail spammer channels who are pointing at obvious condensation trails that they're pointing at the wrong things. And none of you who claim that these are unmarked or non-commercial flights have any evidence of it. Nor can you be bothered to try. It's a joke at this point. I mean, think about it. You're claiming that an unmarked craft is committing war crimes, poisoning us, killing us, and it's going across the sky and nobody notices? Or you notice it, but you can't be bothered to photograph it. You realize if you take a picture of this airplane, this supposed unmarked airplane, this drone, this magical chemtrail dispenser, you take a picture of it, you've got metadata. You got time, date, location. You can cross-reference that with the flight trackers, which is what my app does, and it'll tell you what flight did that. So nobody has proven a UFO. There are no unidentified planes. And that's what you're asserting. Oh, these are unidentified planes. Nope. You're deep in the chemtrail sauce. You're not being rational. And there's no reason to lie. There's no reason to lie and be a propaganda mule. Calm Down says, yes, Art Bell, but in the 90s, they did spray melathion in south central LA to kill the medfly. Yeah, but these are qualitatively different things. Like skywriting, cloud seeding, these are not the same because those are sprays. And this is the big trick. So they show them spraying something like crop dusting. So that's a spray. But think about how much crop dusting spray can a single plane carry. Now look at the volume of a persistent condensation trail. You couldn't fit all that into one airplane. So one is a spray at a lower altitude or an injection of something into a cloud, but the trails are not the result of a spray. It can only be the result of hot air, hot jet exhaust interacting with the cold, rarefied air at altitudes, 30,000 feet. Every couple thousand feet, you're going down a few degrees. So it's cold. So you've got this frigid air, rarefied air, super high. Then you've got this hot exhaust. That's what is generating the persistent trails. That is not the same thing as bug spray at a lower altitude. Space Chimp says, has anyone seen Jurassic? I haven't seen him since 6/11. Yeah, in fact, if you go to autohoax.com, I'll take you there right now. This is an aggregator. It's the hoax report, where anybody who recognizes the inherent fakery in news today and talks about it is featured here. Hoax report, the latest in Psyops, media hoaxes, and predictive programming analysis. So what do we have here? We've got Jake the A-hole. Sanity Machine is very unhealthy. 2026 Super Bowl Elvis Revelation Bowl. So that's JL. 8-4 Head Wound of the Beast in the Flesh. So yes, he is, again, he's listed here, as is Fakeologist and many others. Let's see here. I think we got John LeBon. Late Night Truth Lounge, episode 21. Clip show number 20. So anyway, you can find a lot of the voices that you're familiar with listed here. IPS Deprogram, Aliens Under the Bed, the Nuclear God Construct. Again, go to autohoax.com, and soon this will be a store for the card. Actually, it's already here. I posted something here. Psyop trading cards are posted down here, and you can actually get the eBay and the Ko-Fi links. And I made an app here. It's a live streaming player. And I'm adding more here, but it has the podcasts. It has the live radio. And then I have the latest or the live Fakeologist radio. I'm trying to get a live streaming player and incorporating all these various people that we're constantly talking about, so you can just conveniently go to the autohoax.com, or people who go here will hear this stuff. So no, he did not disappear on 6/11. Mango says, you're talking chemtrails again. Yeah, we're done with chemtrails. No, they've been so debunked at this point that anybody pushing it is questionable. It means one of two things. You're a paid shill, or you need to update your operating system. In fact, that's one of the main things we're doing here. If you update your starting point, your perspective, and you look at the various false starting points that you may have inadvertently accepted, it's a clean slate. So we're offering a clean slate. I'm not against people who believe in chemtrails any more than I'm against people who believe in global warming. But I think it's a bit irrational, to be afraid of the climate and to overreact because we have seasons. I guess seasons are a conspiracy theory now. Might as well make a prediction. We just passed the solstice, but pretty much around this time of year, people will say, oh, it's the hottest summer it's ever been. It's only hot because of us. If only we hadn't deregulated. If only Trump was greener. But yeah, there's going to be heat in the summer. The people are going to act like it's the first time the summer was ever hot. T-Dog says, I watched all the old Art Bell shows. Well, he had a good format. I mean, you talk about fringe topics. It's late at night, open phones. It's not all political. I think that's what was nice about it. It was mostly apolitical. I mean, what's not fun about talking about Bigfoot? What's not fun about talking about metaphysical models and opening up the phones or bringing on guests who have these, very divergent opinions? I don't have an issue with it, but it was a product of the times. Their conclusions, they were all in the box. What we're doing here is a different level. Walter Walker says, I remember being a little kid and my dad listening to Art Bell really late, moment of silence. Yeah, that's another thing too. People remember listening to it as, late night drives with friends and stuff. And so it conversation starters. And that's one of the things that I always found, I think, fun about this, is that our conversations are never boring. Michelle K says, received my cards this week. They look great. Oh, thank you. And the next 12 are being produced right now. Space Chimp says, go outside on a cold day and throw boiling water from a pan. That's condensation trails. Yes. Yes. Now, if you did that at 30,000 feet, they would stick around a bit longer. And then, of course, you add to it, the hot jet exhaust does have the particulates, the actual exhaust particulates that form the nuclei for the ice crystals. Cirrus clouds. Another thing, and what got me talking about the everything is fake crowd, is that the person who was saying everything is fake says, do you remember when the sun was yellow and when the sky was blue? Now, what do you think that is? That's not harmless. Being awake, quote, red pill, awake, being awoke. I'm awakened to the matrix, means that now I know that the sky is milky white and contaminated, and the sun used to be yellow when I was a kid, but now it's burned out. It's just white. Everything is poison. That whole thing. We're being depopulated. Bill Gates is going to block out the sun. Everybody's being injected to death. That's very pessimistic. That's demoralization. So now you're awake like Neo in the Matrix. When he gets in the Matrix, everything is dirty and grimy, and they eat pea soup and pretty much nothing else. And no wonder Cypher, who seems to, Cypher, he takes the blue pill. He's like, I want to go back and have the steak. So the red pill thing, the awakening that is sold to the truther community, is actually demoralization and pessimism and paranoia. And another aspect to it, which I've really kind of honed in on lately, is that the red pill community is a subset of the J pill. I used to think that the Hitler fan club were just these kind of annoying subculture that was trying to get clicks or trying to get in here. And I don't really have them around anymore because I don't really entertain them. I think they're a joke. And a lot of them dislike me. But I used to think they were fringe or fringe of the fringe, that, the 4chaners, it's just a small group. No, actually, that's the bigger model. When you look at the bifurcation, the political horseshoe, the left has their own version of woke. Their main oppressor is, systemic racism. They're anti-white, as in whiteness as a construct. Perfect mirror with the Jewish power construct and Israel's influence over the government and this battle between Jews and Christians that the white nationals believe in. Yeah, these are mirrors. They just have a different bad guy at the top of their pyramid, different scapegoat. But the point of it is that they call it the J pill. So you have the W pill, the white pill, the racism pill, the awakening to the racist world. This one is the awakening to the world controlled by this nefarious group. So they're parallel awakenings, but each one of them is ultimately very demoralizing. Well, beneath this big tent conspiracy are the red pill conspiracies, and red pill is just a mainstream version of the J pill. Alex Jones, for years, has said, you got to watch out for George Soros and the globalists. Then David Icke comes in. Got to watch out for the reptilians. Well, what they're really talking about behind reptilians and globalists and George Soros, these are euphemisms for Israel, for Jews, for bankers, and Jewish banker conspiracies. So what they've done is they've repackaged these old conspiracies and mainstreamed it. QAnon is a perfect example of this. The QAnon adrenochrome. Oh, the Democrats of the deep state, they drink the blood of babies. Yeah, that's recycled. So these are recycled psychological operations. The Great Awakening. Remember the whole talk about the Great Awakening? Did any of these Q people ever arrive at some Great Awakening? No, they became cultists who think that JFK Jr. is coming back from the dead to save them. If not JFK. And Elvis and Bruce Lee and Michael Jackson. Like Michael Jackson's going to save the children. Like very strange claims. But none of them can be said to have awakened to anything. They've been deluded. But these delusionists got their belief system from the government. The same psychological operations from the past have just been updated. They brought us a new satanic panic. The satanic panic was used in the 80s to frighten people about Satanists. But the satanic panic was repackaged blood libel. But Pizzagate is a repackaged satanic panic. And Pizzagate was started by Jack Posobiec, who went into Comet Pizza. Well, this guy's a high-level operative, a Psyop operative, connected to Q. He even knows Marcus Goldfinch, almost hired him. Let's continue. Diana says, my cards are on the way. And your tracking number is in your inbox. Michelle K says, Art Bell was such a vibe, staying up late, listening to all the commercials. Yes. Yeah, I've listened to a lot of the old episodes, and I like the conversational style. Here's what I liked about it, too. You listen to conspiracy theory stuff, it's always hyping up the fear. World War III, Civil War, World War III, Civil War, alien invasion, depopulation. It's always doom and gloom and a sense of urgency. Hurry up and buy your storable food items because the grid's going to shut down. Get your generator because there's going to be a blackout. That has always been the case. And the mainstream stuff is always agenda driven and geared towards getting you to become an activist now. It's always activist driven. That's why I said I'm anti-anti. The antis are activists. I'm not an activist. I'm an inactivist. I'm not taking part in their theater of Psywar. But you listen to the Art Bell and similar programs, and there are many like that in what you consider to be paranormal, and they're not connected to any real-time political agenda, so they tend to be a little more calm and introspective, reflective. I think it's a nicer environment, and that's what I try to keep here. You know, we're not agenda-driven. We don't have a political agenda here. I'm not trying to get somebody into office. How many of these conspiracy theorist sellouts were basically saying you got to vote Trump to beat the deep state, to get the adrenochrome vampires exposed? And it worked. We watched it. I watched half of our first Discord server take the Q pill. They all hit the Q pipe. Somebody was passing around the Q pipe. They all hit it. They all became addicts. And they left. And now they're over there on Q Street taking these hits of hopium, dreaming that JFK is going to come down on a flying saucer and arrest Hillary Clinton. I mean, their conspiracy theories need updating. Who cares about Hillary Clinton? I see these people cheering for JFK Jr. coming back, and I'm like, who are these people? Like they're stuck in like 1997? A lot has happened. Mango says, I haven't listened in years, though. This show is top shelf. Yeah, I haven't listened, but I've been told that George Norrie was kind of a very politicized. But there are so many alternatives. I mean, if you go to any one of these podcast platforms, I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts. For a couple of years there, I was only listening to political podcasts on the fringe, like Daily Beast stuff, human event stuff, left, right. But I try to mix in a lot of other content. The shortcoming that these shows all have, however, is that many of them are just, they're marinated in misinformation. Like, you can't have a serious podcast about alien abductions if you're not going to talk about Mirage Men and the Pentagon admitting that this is all made up fiction. Ted Stryker says the best Art Bell was the worst, with killing Bigfoot and the alien in the freezer. Entertaining for sure. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how I feel about Bigfoot. I like the idea of cryptids. I like Mothman. I don't hate Bigfoot, but you know, these are unserious claims not related to what we're talking about. Like, I believe that Bigfoot is a bear. You know, bears. You ever been to a circus? I went to a shrine circus once, and I saw a couple of Shriners dressed up like wizards, like Gandalf, with like stars on their cone hats, and they were doing these really elaborate like handshakes, all kinds of like fist bumps and finger twists and thumb grabs. It was pretty complex. But I went to a shrine circus. There were protesters outside with signs that had like crying elephants, but they had these dancing bears. Bears just walking around like it's nothing. And that happens a lot. So if you're in the woods and you see some big hairy person walking around, and maybe they even stop and look at you from 100 yards away, you might think it's Bigfoot. But it's a bear. And I can say it's a bear, not probably a bear. I can say it's a bear because the possibility of it being a Bigfoot isn't even an option. It's a non sequitur. And I recognize this when I heard this account of a Bigfoot sighting. It was this couple went out camping in these woods where they were told there are Sasquatch there. Now, the husband did not believe in Sasquatch, but the wife did. During the night, they heard noise. The husband said it was a hiker or a raccoon or a deer, and the wife says, no, it was Bigfoot. Now, the flaw in her argument is that she inserted something that hasn't been proven to exist within the set of options when it doesn't actually belong there. It's non sequitur, so it shouldn't have even been given equal probability as deer or squirrel. The same thing, and I call it maybe Bigfoot logic. Like, maybe it was Bigfoot, maybe it wasn't. No, not maybe it was Bigfoot. It wasn't. It was one of the things that we already know to exist. Now, this is the same problem. I call it maybe Bigfoot logic. When people say, I think I saw the space station. Like, maybe I saw the space station. Maybe I didn't. No, you saw an airplane. Any moving light in the sky should be considered an airplane, unless proven otherwise, because it might be a helicopter. But you have no business introducing UFOs or spaceships as though these are equally likely possibilities. And too many people are sloppy with that. They're loose with their logic, and they're like, oh, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Well, you get 1,000 people saying, maybe I saw it, and it begins to sound like there's something there, like maybe they have a point. And so I see like Bigfoot and cryptids as really the result of a lot of this maybe Bigfoot logic. Ooh, good point. Rebel Black. The government starts every conspiracy theory and they monetize the fakery in Hollywood. So they create the contemporary myths of the day and they get us to pay. It's like paying in church. Like we're paying for our own propaganda. Calm Down says, what about Dogman? Dogman is coming up right now in the conspiracy game. I've seen that. Dogman's kind of a Bigfoot no, it's more of a lichen. It's another cryptid. I like cryptids. I really think they're great. I have no issues with them. But I some of these things are obviously fun, entertainment, and it's a far cry from what we're involved in here. Like ghosts, for example. How many of you have seen ghosts or have had communication with the dead? And I can say, in my opinion, and I would say this is true, but I would never suggest this as evidence, but In my opinion, I have, in fact, had, I believe, communications with the recently deceased. And when I say communications, I don't mean words necessarily, but interactions, we'll say, through the medium of what we would term synchronicity, bizarre coincidences. But there's no way I could offer that as evidence. So if it gets in this realm of speculation, paranormal, and that's why I like that genre. That's why I like Art Bell. They can talk about these things that, yeah, you're not going to have any conclusions. But just because we're not going to arrive at any conclusions doesn't mean we have to throw logic out the window. And we at least have to be accountable for our claims. And so when I say I'm making this claim, I'm making the claim in full knowledge that I can't substantiate it. And I wouldn't tell somebody to believe it. Oh, yeah, thank you. Thirst for Truth. I forgot about that. Yeah, Karen B. Didn't see Bigfoot, but she smelled him. So she had a Bigfoot smelling. She said she went outside, she smelled Bigfoot, and then there's a photograph I saw of a footprint. And I don't mean to ridicule it, but at the time I thought, she said she smelled Bigfoot in her backyard. I'm like, okay, well, first of all, how come Bigfoot never has footprints? Like 1, 2, 3, like 5 footprints. It's just one? Is he a monopod? Does he have only one leg? And also at the time, I thought Brian Stavely was like living in her backyard in a tent. So that there's like mundane explanations for all these things. Calm Down says, check out Peter Canine Dog Training. He claims to have killed a Bigfoot and has the body, and he shows it in a video. It's hilarious. I'll take a look. I like the Church of the Subgeniuses concept. They believed in Yeti. They called them Yeti, and they said that they are advanced beings that are larger than us, but that they are able to slip in between worlds. So they can actually step out of this realm. And they also believe that there are descendants. In fact, the Church of the Subgenius is a UFO cult, and they believe that they are, in fact, bloodline descendants. They are Yetikin. They actually claim to have Bigfoot blood. You could think it's a joke, but this cult said that on July 5th, 1998, the aliens are going to swarm in Ohio, and they're going to pick up all the believers, the cult of the Subgenius. And Subgenius means they are geniuses with regard to the occult, that which is hidden. That's what they mean by sub. Not below genius, but it means that they are geniuses about the occult. And they said that the aliens were going to pick them up and that they would wipe out the non-believers. Now, that didn't happen. That was July 5th, 1998. It didn't happen. But every year, they gather in the same field. And at 7 a.m., they await the aliens. It doesn't happen. But they've been using it as an excuse to throw these parties like year after year. I don't know if they still do it. But I do remember they had this concept of Yeti, and it plays a very prominent role in their cult. Critifest says, did you remote view your situation? I'm not sure if I believe in remote viewing, but I think there might be something to it. I haven't done it, though. I heard this podcast about remote viewing, and it's very much analogous to what the occultists would call astral travel. Like, can people travel out of their bodies? Or is it delusion? Is it lies? The thing is, religions and cultists and gurus and mystics have lied forever. There have always been magic tricks involved in religion. You know the word hocus pocus? Like hocus pocus referring to like magicians. But I believe it comes from, I'm going to double check this here. I'm pretty sure it references the Catholic Mass, where you have the transubstantiation of the bread into flesh. And that there's some Latin phrase that they say when the bread becomes flesh. Here it is. It's okay, hocus pocus, linked to magic or trickery, is a mockery of a Latin phrase, this is my body. Hoc est corpus. But the 17th century Protestants who were skeptical of transubstantiation talked about that hocus pocus, referring to the Eucharist. My point being, what's more likely? That gurus are traveling out of their body and seeing things at a distance, or they're lying? And how hard is it to fake clairvoyance? Like, I'm highly skeptical, but I am interested in it. Because if there is something to it, then remote viewing would likely be the same process. I've had people say they can remote view, but I never believe them. And it's not to be, I'm not trying to say that they're not serious, but like, when I say I believe that I've communicated with the dead, I would expect you to say I don't believe you. I wouldn't want you to believe me, because I'm not really a believer. I think that we have to focus on what we can know and separate it from what is merely belief. I'm open to the idea I'm wrong, but at this point, I'm a skeptic even about my own experiences with these things. But there are certain things that I don't have explanations for. But if a better explanation is provided, I will go to that. Oh, Rico Suave says, that reminds me, did you ever get a hold of the Jackie and JFK role-playing video with Ketchup? Yeah, isn't it strange that everyone is hyping up the JFK files? Like, the JFK files, they're going to release the JFK stuff. We're going to get some answers. And that was after the Epstein files failed to materialize. But the Vanity Fair article largely went unnoticed. And let me bring this up. You go, JFK assassination faked his own. And this was Vanity Fair. So last November, this article came out where it turns out that 2 months before the JFK assassination, he staged his own murder in a home movie with his wife. So here's the Vanity Fair article. Why JFK staged his own murder. Now, all we have are still shots. One of them looks like it's right out of the Zapruder film. But the 16-minute video has not been released. The only person who has seen it is the author of this piece. The untold tale and never-before-seen photos of a 1963 home movie directed by Jackie Kennedy at Hammersmith Farm by James Robinault. So he's the only one who has seen it. But 2 months prior to the assassination, we're talking September 22nd, 1963, there's a silent motion picture. You can go to the John F. Kennedy Library. You have to go request it. A 16-minute long video shot on September 22nd, 1963. The footage is the Kennedy and his family and friends at various locations. 2 months later, he would be assassinated. But in this homemade spy thriller in which they incorporated Secret Service agents, and one of them was even at the assassination. In this home movie, they simulated his death, and there is a scene in there where JFK is dead on the ground covered in Heinz 57 ketchup. Given the events of 2 months later, this scenario took on a dark significance, and it's rarely mentioned in the Kennedy histories. Yeah, that would kind of taint it. So let me see if I can find any pictures. Kennedy had a foreboding about his own early death. Family members came forward with stories of his preoccupation with an assassination. See, I hadn't heard about any of this stuff. He said, crowds don't threaten me. It's the fellow standing on the roof with a gun that I worry about. He spent time studying Lincoln, and we all know about the Lincoln-Kennedy assassination connections. But now, getting to this home movie. It's 16 minutes. I want to find it. I'd like to see it. There's a few still shots in here, but yeah, it came out last year and nobody's talking about it. I think it should be released. I think we should all be able to see it. I'll check it out. I'll see if I can find it on the online JFK library. But the long and short of it is, Jackie Kennedy was really into making movies. It says here, and this is a comment from one of the Secret Service agents. Let's see if I can get his name. Well, here's what he said. I'll get his name in a second. Oh, it's Landis. Okay, Landis. All right, so it says here, Jackie asked the agents to drive up to the main house and react as though they had just heard shots. Landis says the agents entered the house to find the president lying on the floor with ketchup smeared on him. Jackie sat up on the staircase, directing the action from the very spot where she and JFK had been photographed on their wedding day 10 years earlier. He thought it was odd. Everyone applauded when the film was complete. 2 months later, the scenario happened for real. So there's the story. I haven't seen the 16-minute video, but it exists. Going through some comments. Critterfest says, I've seen it. I'm a 64-year-old and I saw it in my early 20s. I'm not fooling around. I saw it not in full, but in parts. What part of Bigfoot did you see? How many legs did he have? Why does he only ever leave a single indentation? Breaking, Robert Norris, the sheriff overseeing the Coeur d'Alene shooter response, started with the LA Sheriff's Department's gangs before becoming a counterterrorism. Okay. Another interesting connection. The overseer of this sniper in the woods Psyop has training in counterterrorism, says here, following September 11th. And this is something too. You'll notice that the people who take part in these psyops often get involved in other psyops. For example, Chief of Police, Las Vegas, during the Harvest Festival, was the Chief of Police in Maui during the Maui fires. Well, this guy says, following the September 11th attacks, Norris was selected to lead a team at the newly established JRIC to assist the U.S. in the war on terror. So what does this tell us? I think he trained with Mossad in Israel as well. Says here, he got clearance with FBI, CIA. He trained with Mossad and Shin Bet before he won the election in 2020. And again, yesterday's fire and the shooting at this location is the anniversary of the pre-9/11 Aryan Inferno, which happened right after the execution of Timothy McVeigh, where this fire department there, as an exercise, burned the Aryan Nation's security house. Following this, a human rights education institute was built on the grounds of it. So that's also intriguing. Didn't catch that earlier. Ted Stryker says, what do you think about reverse speech and backmasking? I think there's something to it. I mean, how many times have we seen examples of anagrams, ambigrams, homonyms? We're talking about symbolism where obviously you're not consciously recognizing these things, but there might be some subconscious inferences made. So maybe we do process things front and back, upside down. And, so it wouldn't really be that far-fetched to suggest that what we hear, even if it's backward, might be processed. In fact, the theory behind within chaos magic, within magical practices, there is this belief about sigils. And a sigil is like a statement of intent. Let's say a prayer to invoke some entity or some kind of spell. You spell out what you want to happen. And what they do is they take the sentence and they take out the double letters and the vowels, and the remaining letters are jumbled together until it becomes some kind of a glyph. But the theory behind it is that the mind who created it will always be able to, they'll always know what it means, even if they don't consciously recognize this gibberish, this scribbling, that subconsciously the message still gets passed on. And so the idea here is that their entire premise is established on the idea that scrambled up messages get descrambled, and it constitutes a form of programming. When somebody doing magic does it, they're self-programming. When the media does it, in part of a psyop, they're likely programming you in indirect ways. So it wouldn't surprise me if backmasking did in fact have the effects that you would think it would. If it, the idea is that you're just bypassing conscious recognition of something. Has some interesting implications. I mean, there is an area where magic, in theory and practice, as it's practiced, does intersect with marketing, media, influence operations, and propaganda. Because ultimately, we're talking about reality control, exercised through exerting one will, overpowering the will of others. Oh, Critterfest, you saw parts of the Kennedy film. Okay, I've seen a few stills, but if you could send it to me, or send me a link, if it's on the, or let us know where to see it. I want to see JFK playing dead, which is just completely morbid. Listen to this. CIA runs the rap game. U.S. aid was funding rappers. Have you all heard this? And think, how could this possibly be limited only to rappers? Why wouldn't this encompass everything? Movies, comics, books.
I can't even tell you how hard
video games.
The CIA runs the rap game. It's insane. The State Department just recently brought like 22 hip-hop artists from all these different conflict zones. I can walk you through in bang.
Okay, this is a short 30-second clip. He's just going through various examples of rappers being used as influence agents with specific objectives. So, in other words, like crisis actors, but
I can walk you through in bang.
Crisis rappers. He's talking about various ones who were placed in certain places to influence people against governments.
The hip-hop movement in
hip-hop music in Cuba used to generate anti-government sentiment. Not surprising. And we see it all the time. I've noticed a lot. We call them sellouts when it's obvious. But yes, not a surprise. Okay, so old version of Idaho shooter Wess Roley's stepdad's Lincoln lists anti-terrorism certification. So what are the odds? You got anti-terrorism connections with the guy running the op, and now the shooter's stepdad has anti-terrorism certifications. Breaking, 20-year-old Wess Roley has been ID'd as the Idaho shooting suspect. It says he may have been born in Russia. It appears his stepdad is a big MAGA guy. And there's an 09A type based on the little information available. Yeah, that's another strange rabbit trail. His stepdad had some photograph where he's in his military uniform, but he's got a copy of a book, a spell book, in the Necronomicon, and a skull. And so 09A refers to Order of the Nine Angels. And Order of the Nine Angels is this, likely run by feds, but it's a satanic neo-Nazi group. So it checks off a few boxes, but there are some Order of the Nine Angel connections to this shooter. So another rabbit trail, it's still developing. The parents who are MAGAites are apparently not involved in his life, and they had some protection order against him. So anyway, like all their stories, it's full of holes by design. And the conspiracy theorists are going to be fed a lot of different interpretations of the story. Right now, the dominant line you're going to probably hear is it was done by SSRIs or something like that. All right, so we'll continue this conversation tomorrow. I think we just scratched the surface, but thanks again, the supporters of the channel and all the generous donors who have supplied blue wrenches for newcomers. Now that you're members of the channel, you will receive notifications for the pre-recorded podcasts, which will be uploaded to all the different sites that are for subscribers, and I'm also including transcripts as usual. Transcripts, pull quotes, so you can kind of get a breakdown of what we will be talking about. Okay, Critter Fest Sanctuary says there was no sound. Yeah, it's a silent film. The JFK filming his own assassination thing. Yeah, and from what I saw, one of the photos of the Lincoln looked like Zapruder's angle. Very, very strange. All right, well, this has been great. I want to say thanks to everyone for the support in the channel, taking part in this think tank, and I think it's going to be a very interesting summer. By the way, on July 4th, there's more nationwide protests. I don't think it's No Kings, but I think it's called. I'll have to double check, but actually I have it here. We do have nationwide protests coming up. Here it is. Free America. Not Save America, that's Trump. Free America, 170 nationwide events coordinated by the Women's March and the 50501. Now, I saw some propaganda from the Women's March group because we just passed the 2-year anniversary of the Roe v. Wade leak, which happened summer 2022. And I remember at the time, this is when I noticed that concurrent programming is something that we can actually pick up on. And it makes more sense than looking at the past at what people will accuse you of just being, cherry-picked information. They'll say you're just cherry-picking. No, we're not. When I saw the Roe v. Wade leak and I saw the Women's March there, because it's about, bodily autonomy, etc. At that same time, Game of Thrones comes out with the latest HBO, is on HBO Game of Thrones. It was called House of the Dragon, and it was like the opening scene was the queen dying in childbirth. And it was very barbaric, and the messaging was pretty clear. The messaging was the most powerful woman in the kingdom, the queen, is still just a broodmare for the state, and they need her to give birth to the child at the expense of her own life because they need a son, because of the dynasty, etc. But that whole scene happened concurrent with the Roe v. Wade leak. So if you're listening to the propaganda from the Women's March and you're like, okay, we're going to this very barbaric state, women are going to lose their bodily autonomy and we're all going to die, and what happens in this opening scene? And it was a perfect mirror. It's like the visual component, the grotesque scenery there, perfectly related to their worst fears. And that's what psyops often have. You have the psyop where the event happens, the fake shooting, the thing happens behind closed doors. It's a closed movie set. But what I'm finding is that the concurrent programming tends to I call it reinforcement content. What's happening in the movies reinforces the power of the propaganda presentation at the psychological operation. So you got a fake event, a fake school shooting, and at the same time, we'll say Uvalde. Uvalde happens. Nobody saw any blood. We didn't see anybody die. At the same time that happened, NBC season finale for their show FBI was about an FBI agent not waiting for a warrant, stopping a school shooting. And they pulled it because it was too close to Uvalde. Stranger Things had a warning label on their season 4 premiere. They said, in light of what just happened at Uvalde, you might want to have a trigger warning here because a bunch of kids die. So you have the visuals of what happened in the psyop in the movies that are on at the same time. It's like, oh, I don't want to watch this Roe v. Wade protest thing. I don't want to watch the Women's March. Let me just turn on HBO. And now you're watching a woman dying in childbirth against her own wishes. She was just essentially had no choice. She's just a tool, an object. So they give you the nightmare fuel. And it's like this for everything. Every time there's a major psyop, there's a buildup of content that feeds the paranoia, that feeds the narratives. We saw this with the buildup to Iran. How many people noticed that we just lived through Top Gun Maverick? And then you had the overlapping character from Thunderbolts, Marvel Comics character, Valentina, the one with the white stripe in her hair, and the simultaneous Tulsi Gabbard coming out talking about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Same hair, same look, same or overlapping messaging here, because we're talking about weapons of mass destruction, blackouts, essentially nukes. But I noticed the concurrent programming a couple of years ago. Well, I noticed it before, but that's when I used the term concurrent programming. I said, hey, look, if we start paying attention to the real-time alignments, that rules out cherry-picked information, Texas sharpshooter fallacy, and it also rules out anything but the propaganda reinforcement being placed there by the same people running the psyops. That's why I say psyop entertainment complex. Because if you're just going off of limited examples, random anomalies, you could say, oh, it's just a coincidence. It's the simulation is what people will say. Well, you can't say it's a simulation anymore unless you're going to also contend that the simulation has a political agenda whenever it throws us hints, and that the simulation is a liberal Democrat, because that's where most of the psyops lean. They lean towards growing state power. They lean towards progressivism. And it's a lot of the psyops are aimed at destroying, it seems, the traditionalism and replacing it with progressivism. So are you telling me that the simulation is a progressive? Because nothing else could explain the utility of these various psyops and their corresponding entertainment parallels. It's why we've moved past these lazy, half-baked non-explanations. They don't offer us anything anymore. All right, we covered the sniper. There's still quite a bit more, I'm sure, that's going to come out with that. I haven't seen it yet, but there's a documentary called The Trayvon Hoax. Filmmaker Joel Gilbert uncovers the true story of the shooting of Trayvon Martin that divided America by examining his 750-page phone records. Rebel Black. Now, when this happened, I thought it was real. At the time, I did. All I noticed, though, was that, wow, the media is engineering these tensions by design, by the way they frame things. So I was paying close attention. Rebel Black here says, this guy doxed a crisis actor, but he believes everything else. So I have not seen this documentary, but to his point, if you recognize any bit of fakery, the whole thing needs to be called into question. That's why perspective is important. That's why some people see the Trump shooting as fake, but they think the sniper really got shot and the fireman really died. They can't get the big picture correct. So inside the MSM box, these anomalies have no context. But logically, the existence of any fakery must essentially negate the validity of the rest of their story. You're like, oh, I think 33 people died at this mall shooting, but there's a crisis actor here, there's an anomaly here, and this looks like an episode out of this TV show that I just watched last night. Okay, well, these red flags should say, well, the body count should be assumed 0. Assume nothing. Assume 0. Any hints of fakery, that body count drops down to 0 because the burden of proof is no longer yours. That's why people who were defending the existence of 9/11 jumpers were in the wrong. It's like, no, you invalidated the ones that were in the plane since there were no planes. So now you should assume 0, not whittle the numbers down. No, any fakery, the whole thing is fake. Unless proven otherwise, with evidence. And that's the key, evidence. But low information believers don't need evidence. They just need headlines. They're headline believers. which is ludicrous in 2025. A little more information here. A group of 33 state police officers received the Governor's Award of Excellence for their response to the assassination attempt of then-candidate President Donald Trump at the Butler Farm Show grounds. So congrats to the 33 cops. Definitely not sellouts to humanity, just good people who help save the president, right? All right, we'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks for the comments, thanks for the support, and I'll send out archives shortly. And hopefully a lot of you join the membership, and you can start listening to the Ips Deprogram podcast, which of course is now officially in production. So we'll see you all later. This is Fepe Akbar, Allergic to Bullshit, featuring Lean Dion.
With your deception, keep it real, that's a profession. Like the whole world is pretending, found the truth around the penguin.